Real Sociedad 1, Manchester United 1. I guess in the grand scheme of things, not a bad result at all for Manchester United away from home in Europe. And that is very much how the performance felt, like an away game in Europe, where defensively you need to be compact, and I think United achieved that. And then on the ball you're going to play a little bit more direct and try and hit the opposition quick when you can. That is pretty much what we saw in this game, and that is what we are going to be looking at in today's video. Before we do that, if you could please subscribe, please. A high percentage of you guys haven't subscribed to the channel, and it would mean a lot if we could change that. So please press subscribe, and then we'll get into the video. So normally we would start the video by focusing on Manchester United on the ball and how we look to play out from the back and things like that. However, as I said in the intro, this was a proper European away performance. So I actually want to start off by focusing on the defensive side of the game, because United use a slightly different approach in this game to what we normally do. Ruben Amorim was actually quite aggressive with his press, and I would say at times, particularly on restarts like goal kicks, United were actually man-to-man. So how did we do this? Well, Højlund, our striker, was actually the deepest of the pressing forwards, which is a little bit unique in the system. So rather than pressing one of the centre-backs like you would expect, he actually often dropped a little bit deeper onto the holding midfielder. And it was actually Garnacho and Xerxes that would press the two centre-backs. Now, you know, of course this could change. There are moments where Højlund's a little bit higher and Xerxes is in this spot. But the important thing is we are playing with this sort of one here and then the two here, basically to match the centre-backs and also the holding midfielder. This means that Sociedad can't play out through the middle of the pitch. Now, of course, the obvious outball is going to be the two fullbacks, but we were a little bit more aggressive with our wing-back positioning in this match. Now, I'm not talking about them being literally all the way up here when the goalkeeper's got the ball, but to be honest, they don't have to be. There isn't a need for them to be all that way, you know, up the pitch. They can sort of start off in this slightly deeper position, and, you know, by the time the ball has travelled, then they can go and press. And this is exactly what we saw from United. Particularly in the first half, I think this worked really well. You can see here, Højlund, the deepest of the front three. The two centre-backs marked by the two inside forwards from United. And as the ball moves across, we can see what United are trying to do here. Xerxes on the centre-back, Højlund on the holding midfielder, and you will also see Patrick Dorgu coming to join the press. As the ball gets moved about, you can see it here. United actually, man for man, on this side of the pitch, being really aggressive and trying to turn the ball over, and a few seconds later, that happens, Casemiro wins the ball out wide. We've got it again here. Now this time, Xerxes and Højlund have swapped over, but the idea is still the same. One player deeper on the holding midfielder, and then the other two high on the centre-backs. And once again, you can see Xerxes here, marking the holding midfielder, but once the ball has gone wide, Dorgu is going to connect from the back. He doesn't have to start super high as long as he eventually arrives there to apply pressure. And again, Real Sociedad are unable to play out from the back and Manchester United win the ball. So this was good pressing on these restarts. Now, unfortunately, United's pressing wasn't quite as good in open play. You know, on goal kicks, I think it was quite impressive. But let's say, you know, Sociedad build possession and then go back and then build the ball, and United press in those moments, it was a little bit more disconnected. So there were plenty of moments where Sociedad could carry the ball forward, and they actually ended up having a fair share of possession, actually more of the ball than Manchester United. So the question now is, how did United set up in those moments? Because recently we've seen a side that drops quite passively into a 5-4-1 at times, struggles to get pressure on the ball, and therefore gets dominated. But again, in this game, the shape was different. I'm not going to say the shape was perfect, because it wasn't, but it was different. We saw more of a back four. So Dalot would play as a right back, Yoro would move across into centre back, and De Ligt would do something similar. But Mazraoui, rather than being an extra centre back, actually became more of a full back, and Dorgu would go a little bit further forward. Now, what's interesting here is the shape suddenly becomes really asymmetrical because of how United were applying pressure. You see, what we saw from Sociedad was one of the midfielders often dropping into the back three like this. So what United actually tried to do was still press with a front three. So Xerxes would come onto the centre-back, Højlund would come onto the midfielder, and Garnacho goes onto the other centre-back. And basically, United end up in this sort of asymmetrical 4-3-3. You can see we've got quite a lot of numbers over here, but down here, not quite so many. I wonder, and I would love to ask Amorim the question, was this to try and deal with Kubo, who is really Sociedad's main man? He is their main attack and threat. Was it to try and reduce his time and space on the ball, or was it simply the best pressing shape for this game? Because as the ball would move across, if Sociedad did cycle the ball backwards, and for example they want to pass to a left back, this is when, again, United would then be a little bit more aggressive. Dalot would come out from the back four and apply pressure here, and now actually we are back into more of our 3-4-3 shape. So again, it's a different pressing solution from Ruben Amorim, which is quite interesting to see because we haven't seen this too much. We've often and largely seen similar structures being applied in each match. But here you can see this is very clearly 2 lines of 3. 2 lines of 3, and Dorgu is actually one of the midfielders here. Now what happens is Sociedad move the ball backwards, and the problem really in this shape is the space on the far side of the pitch, because Dalot isn't as high as Dorgu, so there is a space here. And perhaps if we were playing against a better team, this space would be exploited more, perhaps with a pass in there and then wide. But in this game, you know, Sociedad, an average team, which is perhaps why Amorim was bolder with the press, we are able to make it work, because as the ball comes over, you can see Bruno Fernandes calling for Dalot to come up and join the press, and Dalot does exactly that. He joins the press, and now United are back in the 3-4-3. Really interesting defensive work. Again, here, a line of 3, and then another line of 3. But as the ball eventually moves wider, you can see United's front 3 are now man-to-man with the Sociedad defenders, and as the ball comes across into this open space, Dalot is going to kind of disconnect from the defence, come further forward, and actually get involved with the press. So again, I actually think largely for, again, a European game away from home, where realistically, in the knockout phase, any result is good, I think defensively, United were pretty decent. There were moments, of course, as always, where it's passive, where we do get pinned into the back 5, and then there are fears that the midfield 2 can get overwhelmed, although I think the 2 of them done a pretty decent job. Overall, I would say United never really looked threatened defensively. Of course, Sociedad got a bit of a lucky penalty, so I think United done a pretty good job defensively. I also felt that United did a pretty okay job on the ball as well. In terms of the game plan, it seemed to be to draw Real Sociedad onto us by playing the ball short, and then once we've done that, of course, the Sociedad defender is going to come up the pitch like this. Once we've done that, can we then find the ball in behind the defence? Can we then be a little bit more direct? Can we get Højlund into space? And I think that this is why we saw certain team selections. Normally, Garnacho would play on the left, but he was on the right in this game for his running threat in behind, I think. But I also think that's why Bruno Fernandes played on the right-hand side, so he could pick the ball up and then deliver that ball into the channel for Garnacho to run onto. And of course, with the wing-backs as well, we know they're always a threat. And they are always players, Dalot and Dorgu, that are willing to run into space, to attack in behind. And again, they got into some really good positions. And this is why I feel that, you know, it's far from perfect. This wasn't a United team that took the ball and dominated the game and were by far the better team. Nothing like that. But in terms of, again, away in Europe, we're not in a great place at the moment. Just finding a way to get a result, I think Amorim actually went with a pretty decent approach. In the long term, we will want to see something a bit more expressive and a bit more dominant. But for this game, getting the ball, moving it forward quickly, attacking space like this is the idea. I cannot believe that Dalot didn't play this cross the box. It's mental that he doesn't go across here. Crazy. The fact that he makes this decision instead is a crime against attacking football, but hey ho, it is what happens, and the attack comes to nothing. But in terms of positions, again, Bruno Fernandes, we can see several Sociedad players caught out ahead of the ball because they were pressing high. Bruno now gets time, plays the ball in behind for Højlund, and again, we're in a good position. Garnacho gets the shot off at goal. Again, in this moment here, Mazraoui going direct, in behind. It's Dorgu making the run this time, down the left-hand side, and we get the early cross into the box. I think the idea was good, even if the execution was a little bit poor. Now, as we saw in those clips there, most of the Manchester United attacks were pretty quick, pretty direct, fast-paced, looking to quickly hurt the Sociedad defence. And first of all, I'd like to praise Ruben Amorim for that. I think under Erik ten Hag, we were often too quick, too direct. Under Amorim, we've gone the opposite way. In my opinion, we're a bit too slow at times. This game had a nicer balance. It was nice to see us trying to get the ball forward quickly when we could, but if we couldn't, take the extra passes. I think the balance was quite nice on the ball. In terms of in the final third, though, because of the pace of the attacks, it meant that we were very often attacking a quite exposed back 4. Now, what this means is that players don't have to worry so much about holding the width and stretching the pitch because we don't need to open up so many channels of space. So instead, actually what these guys can do, Dalot and Dorgu, is play just that little bit more narrow. And even in the second half, we saw Dalot moving inside and Garnacho playing wider. But because Garnacho wants to be a goal threat, he may start wide, but he wants to come inside a little bit. And of course, the principle that I'm talking about here, in the final third, is minimum width. Getting players into the final third quite close to each other. So what this means is that when you cross into the box and the second ball comes out, you have players close to each other, so you can win the first contact, but also the second contact. Also, you got numbers in the box, and it does make you, almost at times it looks a little bit more chaotic in the box, but that's kind of more difficult to deal with, right, for the defensive team. Really good example here. All the players, pretty much, Dorgu's just slightly wider, but pretty much within the width of the penalty area, which you wouldn't normally expect from a wing-back system. But because the Sociedad defence is exposed in this moment, Dalot doesn't need to be super wide. He can play this more tucked in position and still be an attacking threat. And it's actually a good pick out here, a really good pick out to find Bruno Fernandes. Good effort here, and we keep the ball alive. Because we're using minimum width, this is now our other wing-back in the 6-yard box, keeping the move alive with the contact. Again, it doesn't quite come to anything, but I think the attacking idea is good. This is stuff that we used to see under Erik ten Hag, right? Minimum width. You can see this now. Everyone within the width of the penalty area, and it means that someone like Xerxes, with his bit of skill, has got players close to him. He's got players nearby, so we can find Dorgu. Dorgu flashes the ball across the box, and in this moment, Garnacho was actually almost the wing-back on the other side, again ending up in the 6-yard box and getting a shot off at goal. And it also played a part in the goal as well. Minimum width. All these players are really narrow, really close to each other. Garnacho with a brilliant pick out for a pass. Højlund does a good job of pinning the centre-backs, stopping them from getting out to the ball. And then the finish from Xerxes is pretty good. The goalkeeper should probably do a little bit better. But again, we can see what United are trying to do in the attack, and I think that's a good thing. It was a slightly different game plan last night from Ruben Amorim, but I think it worked. Were we the better team? Did we deserve to win? I think we just about did, to be honest. Like I said, I think Sociedad get a little bit lucky with the penalty. People are going to turn to expected goals and say that Sociedad had more and that United's was quite low. But I would first of all say, for the opposition, it was a penalty, which massively inflates it. For United, I think what you need to look at in so many of those moments we just saw was, like the Dalot one, for example. That should be a high XG moment, right? Because we should make the pass and we should have an amazing chance, which is why I always talk about opportunities as opposed to chances. Chances, I would say the striker's got the ball and is shooting. That's a chance. An opportunity is the moment that Dalot found himself in, where we've got the opportunity to create something. In terms of opportunities in this game, I think United got into really good positions. Some of the decisions in the final third were just a little bit poor. We have come to expect that, unfortunately, as United fans, but I don't think it was a bad result at all. I wouldn't say still that I'm overly confident for the second leg, because we know what United are like at Old Trafford at the moment. But away from home, in Europe, in knockout football, when we're in a bad place, physically, mentally, tactically, technically, we're in a bad place. I don't think it's a bad point at all, so I'm not going to complain too much about that performance. But how about you guys? What did you think of it? Let me know in the comments down below. I think apart from that though, we're finished for this video. So thank you for watching. Hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.